In Dungeons & Dragons, across all of the editions of D&D, what is that one character class that is the most rare? The type of character class, either as a player, extremely rare to play, or as a DM, you might see only a handful of times in your role-playing career. That's what we're going to explore in this D&D vlog. And we're going to begin with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to look at D&D 3.5, 3.0, 3.x, D&D 4, D&D 5, and perhaps some of the potential character classes of the upcoming edition of D&D. And then over to the comments, my fellow DMs and D&D enthusiasts, what do you think is the rarest character class? So as a player, I've played a variety of character classes. I will say usually I'm playing a monk, a fighter, an arcane-based class, whether it's old school AD&D magic user or more current sorcerer wizard. Played a druid. That's what I tend to focus on. And as a DM, I've seen a variety of character classes. But in really looking back and thinking about the campaigns that I played in, both as a player and as a DM, I've never seen this character class played. It is so rare. It is so extreme just to be able to play it. Like, so many amazing feats have to align. I asked a couple of my longtime D&D friends who have been playing with me for ages. I asked other dungeon masters. They've heard about it. I only found one DM who had actually had a character qualify and play for this class. The Bard. A specific type of Bard. Now, you're saying, well, Fritz, Bard, like, you just roll it up, you qualify. A Bard in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, a character class that requires not only the alignment of the dice gods just to play this character class, but then significant commitment. So let's jump in with the prerequisites for this character class. Now, starting about D&D 3.5, 3.x, we started to see this idea of a prestige class where you had your base character, and then depending on feats that you selected and certain skills and ranks in those skills, you could qualify for a secondary character class that was very specialized, that brought you different attributes. One that I regularly played was as a sorcerer, having ranks in lore and a couple of meta magic feats, opened up the Red Dragon Disciple, where you literally ignite your draconic heritage, and it gains you some spell abilities, a breath weapon, and other aspects. We also see across Dungeons & Dragons where certain character classes on the stats require a minimum, a type of buy-in. You have to have primary numbers in two stats. You know, sometimes it's like strength and charisma for the different paladin builds, or you need a certain level of dexterity to qualify for this. So this idea of a minimum attribute for character classes, that's been around for a while. And it kind of makes sense for some of the more detailed or elite character classes. You need to have that proficiency. Now, the Bard in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, you need multiple qualifiers for this in terms of the attributes. You need strength, you need dexterity, you need wisdom, you need high levels, which, looking at the rules as written, raw, is very challenging. Now, in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the way it is intended to play, rules as written, is you roll for your stats. You know, character creation is interesting over the various editions of D&D. In that Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, you roll your stats first, and then you kind of decide based on the stats what character class you're going to play. Sometimes your stats are so legendary, you're going in and saying, well, I didn't intend to play a thief, but looking at these stats, you know, I got 18 dex. Having a 16, 17, or 18 in any primary attribute is massive, not only for the experience point bonuses, but also for the modifiers that's going to give that character class. So I had no intention to play a thief, but I have to go with these stats. And at other times you decide, well, I really want to play a certain type of character class. The stats, they're okay. I have a fighter that's maybe strength 12 or 13. That's not overly strong, but it's still doable. But to qualify for the Bard class, you need to have minimums in set attributes. So right away, you have to roll those stats up. You have to qualify for them. Now, that's not to say you can't play AD&D with point buy or assigning fixed scores. I mean, it is D&D. The Dungeon Master, the players can agree to do whatever they want. But anytime that I've played Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and how we continue to play it is the experience of the game as intended. You roll those stats. Sometimes they're legendary. Sometimes they're not so legendary. Most of the time, they're somewhere in the middle. Now, of course, there are ways to increase your stats in AD&D. They don't automatically bump up to godlike proportions, but if I had stats that were, meaning when you level up at certain intervals, but if I had enough gold, I could buy these various magical tomes that boost your stats by 1. Then you kind of gain those abilities. So if they're close, but I don't quite qualify for the Bard, I can potentially bump them up as I adventure. Now, there is no Bard class per se, but the combination of it to qualify, it's kind of like its own unique class in AD&D in that you start off as a fighter. You need to gain certain levels in the game as a fighter. So you move through, you do that. You qualify for that. I think it's around level 7 is the minimum. Sometimes maybe tactically you want to go to level 10. That right there is a lot of experience. Again, in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, earning experience is massive. And the different character classes earn experience and levels at different points. But still, that's a big experience pool. First, we need the stats. Then I've got to go through as a fighter. Then after you've gone through as a fighter, then you have to secondary class as a thief. And you have to go through those. Now, at this point, you're kind of rocking fighter, thief. You've got some good bite. You've got some good ability. But again, now you're pouring experience points into the thief class, which does level up quicker. And then finally, the third class, the druid. You need to take certain levels as the druid. What this means is essentially you have a 3-in-1 type character class with above average, the stars align, the dice gods smile upon you, stats. And at that point, you can opt to become a bard and gain some other abilities, gain some special abilities, gain your bard song. Extremely, extremely, extremely powerful in the game. Certainly one of the more powerful character classes, but to qualify for it, to qualify it, the stats, the adventuring time, and the experience time, that is a massive, massive, massive commitment. And again, if your stats don't quite qualify, but they're close, you can always bump them with the various tomes. But if you're going in with a 10 strength, you're going to have to read 7 or 8 of these tomes, and they're anywhere from 60 to 80,000 gold pieces. I won't say that's impossible. Nothing's impossible in D&D, but it is quite an amazing feat. So out of all the character classes that I've seen and played, the rarest one, the one where the stars have to align, I've never personally played it. I've never personally seen it. I only know real-time one DM that has seen a player play it with the qualifying stats and the experience points put in. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Bard gets my vote for the most rarest character class. Turning it over to my fellow D&D enthusiasts, let's open it up to any edition. Any edition. AD&D ranging to the current edition of D&D, perhaps projecting into the next edition of D&D. What do you think is the rarest character class that a player could possibly play?